This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your go-to Iowa-based sports show, hosted by the one and only Elliot Clough.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
What's up, Cedar Valley, and hello to the Hawkeye State. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com with me, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter. We have a jam-packed show today, talking with UNI's head men's basketball coach, Ben Jacobson, today. He stops by to tell us a little bit more about A.J. Green and the draft process for A.J., what he's going to bring to the NBA, the upcoming season, and more. A little bit of a surprise in there with Coach Jake in our conversation that I'm very excited about. You'll have to stick around to listen to that. And then, of course, we're talking with Derek Murray from basketballnews.com. He's an NBA draft analyst and advisor. He'll be telling us what he thinks about AJ, where he expects AJ to go, as well as Keegan Murray and some overall NBA draft stuff from him. Derek does incredible work. Very excited about both of those interviews. But the first thing that I need to talk about today is something that I don't necessarily even want to talk about. Of course, chances are you know the shooting that happened in Ames a couple nights ago was at Cornerstone Church there. That was at the Salt Company kickoff for the summer, and 2 young women were killed. The shooter ultimately turned the gun on himself. Now, yesterday, Story City police were able to identify the 3 individuals who were killed, the 2 victims and the shooter. And what we're not going to do here on AM 950 and KOEL.com is identify the shooter. This individual does not need any post-mortem glory. He does not deserve it, and he will not get it from me. What we are going to do is name the 2 individuals who lost their lives way too young, 22 and 21. The 2 students who were at Iowa State, Eden Mariah Montang and Vivian Renee Flores. These 2 young girls were approaching a church where I'm assuming they had regularly been a part of. We're going to participate in worship, what they call somersault, which is a great name for them in their summer ministry. If you're unfamiliar, the Salt Company does reside in Cedar Falls, Waterloo as well as Iowa City. I'm not sure if Cedar Rapids has one too, but it's a college ministry that the Salt Network has put together. I used to attend in Cedar Falls, and I also went when I was in Madison, Wisconsin as well. And I felt the need to talk about it on my show that I'm on one of our sister stations, but the 1-minute break that I was allotted did not do it justice, nor do I think I will do it justice here on AM 950 KOEL, but I need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. This awful tragedy that happened in the parking lot of a church, of a place of worship this week in Iowa. And, to be frank, the other shootings didn't have this level of impact on me. The one in Texas, God, it was awful. 20 children, 19 children, and 2 adults. But it was in Texas. It wasn't here. Of course, we know about the more recent shootings in Waterloo, which are terrible. But I have to tell you, this one really, really hit home for a variety of reasons for me. I didn't really attend church regularly, other than when I was little and didn't really know what was going on until I was in college. I went to the Salt Company there in Cedar Falls and followed that up by attending Basic on campus as well, where I led a couple Bible studies with some amazing people. Taylor and Carly, I don't think you're listening to this, but they are two of my favorite people in the entire world, two of my best friends. We led co-ed groups together, and it was just a blast, and I really felt like we all grew and got to know each other so well, and we learned a lot. And I am going to be forever grateful for those relationships that I built in those ministries. And though I ultimately decided not to attend SALT and to go to a different college ministry, I met some freaking incredible people there too. There are some amazing people at these ministries. And to have that happen at a church that I know that people attend, I know those people, not that people in general attend, but I know individuals that attend that church personally. I had heard about the news, and I wrote about it. Again, it's on KOEL.com if you haven't heard all the details about what happened. I had heard about it, and I wrote about it the other night, and once I finished up, I didn't want to be by myself. This was one of the most impactful tragedies to me to date, I think, in my, minimal 26 years of life that I can remember. And later on in the night, I was spending time with my girlfriend, who was kind enough to let me come over fairly late because I didn't want to be by myself last night. And she consoled me while I was grieving, and I still am grieving today. My chest hurts thinking about it. And again, this is Corn Stalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL here on KOEL.com as well. And I got a message from a friend of mine, great friend of mine. It wasn't one of the two that I led a group with, but she told me that she was hanging out with two of our other friends from college. Well, one of our other friends from college and our friend's sister. And come to find out that one of my best friend's sisters, she was in a group with the Salt Company, a small group. They call them connection groups. And they're incredible for growth. They foster a lot of good. And it's a great way for young people to connect with one another. And my friend's sister had a few friends that were attending the event. And one of her friends was killed last night. And I don't know what to do with that. That could have been my friend's sister. That could have been my friend. That could have been many of my friends who attend church on a regular basis. It could have been me. And to have a sense of your mortality at 21, 22, 26 for me personally, I don't know what to do with that. My dad, who is almost 60 now, has told me that he is aware now more of his mortality than he has been in his entire life. And I don't really, he tells me that. I'm like, okay, I understand that, Dad. And I can't, I don't sympathize. I empathize, I guess. But now it's become entirely too real for me and for, I'm assuming, so many others at such a young age. And for elementary school students, man, in Texas, 19 of them. And the last thing that I want to do is use this for political purposes. I think people who do that are disgusting and self-righteous, and it does no justice to these people to immediately stand on their graves and try to make a political point. We mourn first. We mourn the dead. We don't use it as a political platform. And to be completely honest, to be on an ag station and to say something contrary to what the general public that listens to this would agree with or think is not my intention. It's not my intention to step up and, to be frank, I lean right. 26 years old, I lean right. I'm sure some of you out there were thinking, oh, look at this young liberal kid who doesn't know what he's talking about. No, I'm pro-Second Amendment. I think that's very important for our republic, for our democracy, to have that. But this is happening over and over and over. 20 mass shootings since what happened in Texas. 20. Probably more now. We have to change something. I don't know what that is. And this is not my stance politically. This is not me saying, oh, if you're pro-Second Amendment, you're horrible, because I'm pro-Second Amendment. Jeez. We can all agree that this is terrible. And we can all agree that we never, ever, ever want these things to happen. We have to change something. I don't know what it is. I'm not a politician, nor will I hopefully ever be. I'm a sports talk show host. But this cannot go on without being talked about. To not talk about it, to avoid the subject, to make some sort of political stance is a massive disrespectful gesture against Eden Mariah Montang and Vivian Renee Flores, who were 21 and 22 years old, going to worship service. And I know this is a sports talk show. I know it is. And to those of you who say stick to sports, whatever. I frankly don't care what you have to say. You can say so much when things happen elsewhere. You can put it off and put it off and put it off. And frankly, I listen to more conservative outlets, media outlets, like Louder with Crowder and Ben Shapiro show, and I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson, and I don't necessarily know that JP would say he's conservative, more classical, liberal. But I just tuned all of those things out this week, and last week for that matter. Because they're going out there and saying you're standing on these graves. Well, your response is to say, oh, well, all these laws are in place, and it's the shooter's fault, it's not the gun's fault. Read the room, man. Not even that, but that is just, it's gross. It's gross. Can we just mourn? I suppose this is my way of processing grief. This is my passion. This is my job, and I'm so happy that it is, and I'm so lucky that I get paid to do this. And we always do our best to talk about Iowa sports here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk, and maybe provide a little bit of an escape for you from the real world. And I'm sorry if this evoked some more negative emotion for you regarding this, and that your heart breaks. Mine's breaking. Mine's broken. We gotta talk about this stuff. We gotta remember Eden Mariah Montang and Vivian Renee Flores, because they deserve it. They should still be with us. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com. We'll be back talking with Coach Ben Jacobson about A.J. Green and the NBA draft, as well as the 2022-2023 season for the UNI Panthers.
Welcome back to Cornstalks and Sports Talk here on AM 950 KOEL with me, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter. Huge news for UNI basketball this week as A.J. Green has announced he will remain in the NBA draft and will pursue his goal of becoming a professional basketball player. Here to talk with us now about A.J. as well as all things UNI basketball this Saturday morning is Coach Ben Jacobson. Coach Jake, how are you this morning?
Yeah, doing great, man. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate you making a little bit of time. I'm sure you've got quite a busy schedule with the off season and everything happening with AJ. So speculation in just about every facet surrounding AJ this last 2 months in all reality, and specifically his decision. What can you tell us about what went into that decision for AJ?
Yeah, he went into the process, and I know AJ has talked a lot about this. He went in with wanting to get as much feedback as he could, right? To find out, where teams felt like he was at and what that would mean for him, whether it's best to stay in the draft and give it a shot this year, or, go back to college for one more year. And if he's going to be in a better position a year from now. And so when AJ went into it, when he made the decision to declare for the draft this spring, it was, eyes wide open. Let's get all options on the table. And let's see what we get for workouts. See if we can get to. He ended up, of course, being in the G League Combine, but seeing if we could get to the G League Combine, hoping to get to the NBA Combine, and then take all of that feedback and with his family and with his close friends, sit down and talk through it and make a decision. Make a decision that's going to be best for him at this point in his playing career. And man, I just feel we're just so happy for him and so proud of him and excited for him. And he's going to make it. Like he's and now he has made the decision that process is going to start right now instead of a year from now. But man, he's going to be a terrific NBA player, and we're just really excited for him and really happy for him that he feels good about the decision that he made.
I remember when AJ was a freshman and I happened to talk to another player on the team, and they told me, as long as AJ stays healthy, he's going to the NBA. Could you see that from the get-go too?
Yeah. It's one of the things that we talked about even in the recruiting process. AJ very goal oriented. He's always had in his own mind, and I think even written a lot of them down as to when and what he wants to accomplish in his basketball career. And I think he's done that even through his high school career, before he got here. And one of the things has been to play in the NBA. And so that's something that we talked about during the recruiting process and talked about early on. And certainly felt like, that was going to be something that was going to be on the table for him. One, because he is a good player. He's worked very hard to get to the point where he's a good player. Two, his drive, his determination, what he's willing to sacrifice, what he's willing to put into giving himself the best chance possible to be an NBA player. It's tremendous. And so when you combine those two things, Elliot, there's no doubt, even early on, senior in high school, freshman year, that he was going to have an opportunity to do just that and be in the NBA. The time when it became really clear to me. And I've had some people ask me whether it was 2 years ago when he declared for the draft after his sophomore year, or even more recently in the last couple months, if I have felt like he's going to be an NBA player. And the 6-game stretch that he had in early January, his sophomore year, was unlike any other 6-game stretch I had seen. There was maybe one or two other guys in my time in the league that had put together that type of stretch for 6 consecutive games. And that was the last time I needed to think about it. Up until then, I'm like, he's going to make it because he's very good and he's going to work his tail off. So yeah, he's going to make it. After that 6-game stretch, this is the last time I thought about it, Elliot. I've had zero question in my mind since that 6-game stretch. And so, for a long time, I think AJ's known in his own mind that he's going to do, what he has to do to get himself in position to play in the NBA. And, for us as his coaches, for me as his head coach, I've felt the same way the entire time. But that 6-game stretch his sophomore year, just that told me everything, or helped me see everything that I would have needed to see to say, man, he's going to make it.
Again, we're talking with Coach Ben Jacobson from UNI basketball here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. This is Corn Stalks and Sports Talk. So when it comes to AJ, what he's going to bring to the table on and off the court. Maybe some of these NBA teams don't know him as well. Well, they definitely don't know him as well as you do. But if a general manager, a scout, a coach gives you a call and says, hey, what are we getting from AJ on and off the court? What would you tell him, Coach?
Yeah, I think what I would start with is he just wants to win. And I think sometimes, because whether it's AJ or a different player, when they're really good and when they're either your leading scorer or one of your leading scorers, I think sometimes the focus gets turned to, it's more about his game than it is, whether it's AJ or anybody else. It's more about that particular player because that's what their role is for your team, right? They're good enough to be your leading scorer or one of your leading scorers. And I think that is where I would start, Elliot. He wants to win, and whatever that means. And a really good example happened in league play this year. And I think Valpo was one of the games, and Evansville might have been the other one. And I might have this off a little bit, but we had, I think, back-to-back games at home. And in one of the games, they guarded him one way, and the other game they guarded him the other way. Right? And so one of the games required him to be a guy who was going to pass the ball a lot, and he did exactly that. They were going to, and a lot of teams did. A lot of teams came off when handoff or ball screen, and they were going to put a second guy on him, or they were going to trap him. And he's always been very good at getting that ball out of that situation so that we can play advantage basketball behind it. And in the other game, they played him different, and it allowed him to get to his shot more because of the way they played the ball screen or the handoff. And he played them both great. The reason I use that as an example is him playing the way the defense dictated was our best chance to win. And that's what I would tell anybody who called. If a GM or whoever else, like he's a very good basketball player, and he's worked really hard to get there. He's going to do from the decisions he's going to make on and off the floor to best position himself to make it in the NBA. He's going to do all of those things. His character is extremely high. Terrific teammate. Those things are all in place, and those are not to be taken for granted. Right? But at the end of the day, if you're an NBA GM, part of the equation is, okay, we need to, we like to win. And so, okay, what's that mean for a guy like AJ or anybody else that we're currently looking at or evaluating? And that to me really, has always stood out with Age. He just wants to win. And whatever that means and whatever that requires, he's willing to do that.
So now UNI has a few guys playing overseas. We've seen players like Wes Washpun go and play in the G League. And, of course, there's Seth Tuttle, who went through the draft process. Now you've got AJ, who has a real shot of being drafted and playing in the league. Does having that in your back pocket help with recruiting?
Oh, no question. Yeah. To two other guys that are going here recently. Jeremy Morgan is playing, and I'm sure you're following Jeremy's stuff. Like he's playing at a really high level right now overseas, and their team is in the playoffs and doing well right now in their playoff series. And then Isaiah, and maybe you followed that as well, Elliot. Isaiah just got done with USA Basketball 3-on-3. He was in the G League with the Texas Legends, and so Isaiah is another guy who's really doing well. Bennett Cook is still playing, but the more recent ones and the more that are playing either right now would be the guys you mentioned, and then I would throw in Jeremy and Isaiah as well. And now with AJ going through the draft process and on his way to whatever that path looks like, on his way to starting his professional career and his NBA career. Yeah, there's no doubt, because that's, for the majority of the players that we're recruiting, they want to be doing the same thing. So when you've got the guys we're talking about and you've got some places you can point to, and now, and you mentioned Seth going through the draft process. Wes had workouts and went through it. Jeremy had workouts and went through it. We talk about those three guys a lot. It was 3 years in a row, right? For those guys in terms of our program and them being seniors, 3 consecutive years where we had guys go through it, play in summer league. And now with AJ, at the point he's at, we'll all have to wait and see how it plays out at the end of June, right? When we get to the draft and what exactly it means. But it does. It is. It's really important for our program in terms of recruiting. And I would say, in that piece is extremely important, but it's just, man, it's just for our coaching staff, for our program, for our school, for our community. I mean, everybody takes a lot of pride in whether it's our players, our football players, recently, obviously that, Trevor getting drafted, Spencer getting drafted early, in the rounds, and you keep going back to other guys like that. That's something that I know that everybody involved with the University of Northern Iowa takes a lot of pride in.
So other UNI basketball news happening this week, Gameli Aheligba added to the coaching staff. What went into the process of hiring Gameli, and how did he stand out?
Yeah, so we've known each other for a long time, and that piece of it helps. But our program, our assistant coaches, myself again as our head coach, like we've known a lot of guys for a long time, right? So that doesn't just jump you to the spot where you're where you're going to get hired into that spot. He's very familiar with our program. Obviously, his younger brother, Kajo, was a big-time player for us and played on terrific teams and is still, a big part of our program. He played with Eric Crawford in high school at Tartan High School, so the relationship goes all the way back to there. One of the things I talked to G about and I've kind of laughed about with a couple of others. So we've had a player from Tartan High School in our program for 20 straight years. And this was going to be the first time that we didn't. Now, I shouldn't say that, because if Croft would have stayed, then the job went to open, we would still have our Tartan guy. Okay. Now with Croft leaving, had we not hired a guy from Tartan, this would have been the first time, because Mark finished his master's degree and was able to get a great job up at Minnesota Duluth. Croft is over at Iowa State. And then, as we know, Antoine transferred back to Concordia St. Paul to finish his career there, get his degree, and be with his daughter. And so we had 3 Tartan guys that moved out, Elliot. And so G keeps that streak going. Now that really isn't on the list of the reasons, why he was hired. He's just done a terrific job, at all the spots. He worked for Coach Glass, my head coach in college. He worked for him early on in in G's coaching career. He worked at the University of North Dakota, and knowing the head coach there, knowing a lot of people up there. For me, that's just some of that feedback. He worked at the University of South Dakota for Craig Smith. Craig has done a terrific job with his own career and speaks, just very highly in terms of the job that G has done. And so in terms of him as a coach, on the court with the players, academically with the players, the personal growth for our players, in terms of a recruiter, like all of those things, check all those boxes, Elliot. He's got them all. But then you go to the most important part, and that is, okay, how, at the end of the day, how is he with the players? Like, what is that relationship like? And what is he going to mean to them as young people? And I'm just telling you, he is one terrific. I'll call him a young guy because he's younger than I am. Elliot, he's not young anymore, but he's plenty younger than I am. He's just a terrific young guy, and that is the most important piece.
Yeah, we're talking with UNI men's head basketball coach Ben Jacobson here on Cornstalk Sports Talk AM 950 and KOEL.com. So you've been active in the transfer portal for recruiting. Nothing quite come up yet. Of course, you've got Trey Campbell coming in from Cedar Falls High, and those three freshmen from last year who redshirted, and Michael Duax and Landon Wolf and Chase Corbat. What can you tell us about their game, and how are you planning on filling those final two scholarships? Are you looking at maybe some guys that got overlooked, or are you still looking in the portal? What's the plan there?
Yeah, from a recruiting standpoint, I'll start with that part of it, Elliot. We spent, the better part of the last 4 or 5 weeks, working the transfer portal hard, and we had some guys on campus and ended up not going with a handful of those guys. And so we're still actively, taking a look, whether it's the portal or prep school or, high school. So we're still actively, taking a look. But, what I would tell you is, maybe shifting gears now to our current roster as we we start workouts up here on Monday. And, so we'll have everybody back this weekend and you're ready to get going. And, man, we had a great month of April. We had 11 guys working out, every day. The workouts were really, really good in the weight room. The individual workouts with on the court, those were great. So it's a roster that we really, really like. Right now, there is a significant difference in the amount of experience from last year to this year. Okay, but that's okay. Now, Bowen, Nate, Titan, Cole, all four of those guys have 3 years left, but they're not really sophomores, right? They would be juniors in terms of their experience level. So there are, because I've thought about our team, and I'm like, man, we've got 4 guys that have 4 years left. We've got 4 guys that have 3 years left. We got 8 guys that have 3 and 4 years left. And, but the guys in that, what would be sophomore class in terms of eligibility remaining, Elliot, those guys are really juniors. Okay. So then you tack on to those 4, you've got James Betts, who's just a year older. And then we've got the old man of the group in Austin Fife. And, so we do have 6 guys that have been around for a long time. So that's a great place to start. And, the young guys that you asked about, Landon, Michael, Chase, those guys had a very good redshirt season. Got a lot done in the weight room. Did some things at practice, and Landon was practicing at a very high level. He ended up tweaking his ankle and had to have surgery on that ankle, so he missed really January, February, March. He missed those 3 months, but he had done enough and shown enough. He was really practicing again at a high level before he hurt that ankle. And then Michael and Chase made a lot of progress. So. Yeah, we've got 3 guys that in that spot, and I've talked with quite a few people about Trey Campbell. Trey had a monster year, and I've watched Trey since he was in elementary school, and just coming up through. I've got a son who's the same age and played on all the same teams, and they were teammates in football and teammates in basketball, and so I've seen Trey play different sports. I've seen him run track. Like he's a quietly, highly competitive young guy. Like his demeanor doesn't change much, right? So you never quite, you maybe never quite see a lot of emotion from Trey, but he is a highly, highly competitive young guy, and he's coming off a terrific season. Like man, what a year he just had. So those 4 young guys, are guys that we're excited about. And they've got a great opportunity in front of them because we did graduate Trey. We did graduate Taiwan. AJ's in the draft. Noah has transferred to Missouri, and Antoine has transferred up to Concordia St. Paul. So it's great opportunity for those guys. But we're really excited about the group, Elliot. We are. I really like them.
One last thing from me, Coach Jake, before we let you go. You mentioned the old man, Austin Fife. How's he doing? How's his health progressing?
Yeah, he had a great stretch. So after the season, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks after the season, we were able to get up to Rochester to get him looked at the Mayo Clinic and got a great report there. They feel like the COVID has gotten much better and in a lot of ways gone away. So that piece of it, we really feel good about. And so we were able to get back into some workouts, started riding a bike and doing that for, kind of a half hour a day at a certain level. And then, each 4 or 5 days he could bump up his level in terms of how hard he could go. And he put together a great 4 to 5 week stretch in the weight room on the bike, started doing a little bit of running. And so really, really good to see him back. And he did a great job during the year, Elliot, as we all know, of keeping his spirits up and putting the team first and just doing everything he could to help us win a championship and to be as much of himself as he could possibly be, knowing the challenges that he was going through. But I will tell you that 4 or 5 weeks that we just came out of was the most that he's been himself in a long time. Like it was Fife the way we're used to seeing Fife. And so some of those challenges in terms of the COVID are behind him. So now it's just getting all the way up and running, right? Getting all the way healthy, getting all the way up and running. But we feel like he's on a good track and anticipate that we're going to have him back.
Man, Coach, that's great to hear. Basketball is huge, but when you got young men like Austin Fife in your program and he's able to come back and have a healthy final season, just great stuff. So we're happy for Austin and for UNI basketball. Coach Ben Jacobson, kind enough to join us on a Saturday morning. Coach Jake, thanks so much.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks, don't go anywhere. We will be right back here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk, talking a little bit with Derek Murray from basketballnews.com. He's an NBA draft analyst and expert. He'll be telling us where he thinks AJ Green will go and if he'll be selected in the NBA draft, as well as what he thought of Chris Murray's decision, where he thinks Keegan Murray will land, and more. Again, don't go anywhere. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com.
And we're back here for this third segment on Cornstalks and Sports Talk, AM 950 and KOEL.com with me, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter. So like we just finished talking about with Coach Jake from UNI basketball, AJ Green is headed to the NBA draft. And here to talk with us now is Analyst, NBA draft scout and advisor for Basketball News, Next Pro Hoops, and Babcock Hoops is my guy for NBA draft content, Derek Murray. Derek, I'm assuming you've seen everything about AJ going pro. We've talked about him a few months ago. We talked about him, I think, even before that. Have your thoughts changed at all about his decision to go pro? What was your initial reaction when you saw he was going to pursue a gig in the NBA?
I do like the decision to go pro at this point in his career. Like, he's shown so much as a shooter, as a free throw shooter, just kind of as a veteran decision-making guy. From a pure NBA draft pro perspective, I don't know what he could have gained by transferring somewhere else and doing it again. I mean, you've got a guy who's capable of averaging 20 a game, 40% from three, 90 from the free throw line. Like, there's not a whole lot more as a pure evaluation standpoint that I need to see. So again, the value of staying in college, living out, another year of your youth or childhood, of being a big man on campus, like, absolutely. But from a pure NBA perspective, I agree with the decision to come out.
And so you mentioned the possibility of transferring. That's something we've talked about a lot over the last 2 months in regards to him possibly either going to Duke or to Iowa State. So essentially what you're saying is, even taking what many perceive to be is a leap in level of competition and playing against better defenses wouldn't have necessarily done anything for you?
I think it all matters based on your role. So Brady Manick is going to become kind of like the poster, the example, if you will, of like a shooter leaving a school, going to another one and excelling. So Manick, I live here in Oklahoma City. I got to see him 4 years at OU, and he was used almost primarily as a five. He was pretty misused just based on what the roster was, how the construction was set up, and like it toughened him up. He was an incredibly tough kid, physically and mentally, was willing to get in there and bang and rebound and all this stuff. He goes to Carolina, and he's put into that stretch four role, which is what he's built to do. So I don't think, going to Carolina is necessarily in and of itself what made his stock rise. I think he finally entered a situation where he's used to his best skill set, to his best ability. With AJ, I don't think he was ever misused at UNI. So I think again, just as an evaluator, I already know what he is, what he's capable of, like what he can do on an NBA floor, what he can become. Doing that somewhere else, for me personally, I actually don't really, I wouldn't have cared that much because he was already in a role that showcased what he can do.
Of course, it's likely that if he's drafted, it'll be in the second round. I remember a few years ago when Matt put out a mock draft, and I saw AJ at the end of the second round, and I was like, "Let's go!" But what are the chances that happens in your mind, that he gets drafted?
Yeah, so if I had to bet on it, I'm not comfortable yet predicting that he'll get drafted. I think, again, we're losing 2 spots in this draft. There's only 58 selections instead of 60 because of the 2 forfeited picks at the back end of the second. I think you're going to have a couple sneaky international draft and stash guys be picked, probably 45 to 60 as well. What's interesting and what gives him a chance is how the NIL deals in college basketball are affecting the strength of the back of the second round. You have guys who probably would come out in a normal year, Oscar Tshiebwe, Trace Jackson Davis, who to college programs are worth a lot, and they're going to make a lot of money at their respective schools this year. So that does open up and kind of weaken the players that you have at the back end of the second. And that is where I do think that Green has a chance to sneak in, because there are going to be teams who are contenders who need players for a specific role. And that is where I could see the value. So you look at, 55 Golden State, 56 Cleveland. What do they need right now? Honestly, they don't need anybody on ball, but they need shooting wings. Like, those two teams could use a shooting wing who has positional size and is highly intelligent. Like, it makes sense. So we don't have him in there right now. But again, with just the way that things have shaken up, people who have stayed in, who have not declared, gone back to school, I do think he has a chance, especially in that 50 to 58.
Shooting is AJ, and that we've heard that from him. We've heard that from evaluators. So when you look at AJ, is there anything else that gets him time on an NBA court, or gets him not necessarily time, but on a roster at the NBA level?
I mean, I think the free throw shooting, honestly, as simple and maybe silly to some people as that may sound, but a guy's a career, I think he's 90.0 is what I'm looking at. 91.7 as a sophomore, 91.5 as a senior between injuries. Like,
program records.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Like, there's a place for that. Like, if you can get to the line, hey, if all you're going to do is off the bench, give me a couple minutes a night, I'm just going to have you take 2 threes and maybe try to get to the line once or twice. Worst case, I make you the guy who shoots technical. I mean, if you're gonna hit 90% from the line, again, like, there's a place for you. And offense and floor spacing is what wins games right now in the league.
And when we're looking at AJ and the possibility of him being taken or eventually picked up by somebody, one thing that we've talked about, that he and I talked about, was seeking the opportunity to get a 2-way contract. I had heard this. I'm assuming you have as well, that his workout with the Bucks this week went really well. Do you suppose it's a possibility for him to go to Milwaukee, 1, and 2? Do you see him getting a 2-way, or do you think it'll be more likely that he ends up in the G League right away and maybe gets a 2-way this season?
Yeah, Milwaukee's a team that I don't think they're very wasteful with their workouts. So I think the fact that it went well up there, they had him up, I think is pretty telling. And that means there's at least some interest, which is great for him. And again, I think he is a prime candidate, similar to Manic, that as soon as that draft is over, if they're not selected, I think he's going to have 2 or 3 options on a 2-way contract. Worst case, I think you're looking at Exhibit 10. Again, a kid who's 6'4", who can shoot that well, somebody's going to come get you. So even if he's not selected, like, I do not see this being a kind of thing where he goes to bed without a contract.
That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. And that explains a lot as to why he decided to go to the NBA. I know a lot of people weren't so sure. Obviously he wasn't necessarily so sure either because of that possibility of Iowa State and Duke on the table. Again, we're talking with Derek Murray of Babcock Hoops, Next Pro Hoops, and basketballnews.com. He is a draft scout and advisor. So when it comes to AJ, is there anything rather that you think would keep him off the floor? I mean, obviously defense has been an issue for AJ. Is that what you're looking at too?
Yeah. From the times I have seen him in person, that was my one knock on him, was the lateral mobility, lateral quickness, and the ability to defend on the ball on an NBA floor. Like, that's where I think the questions come up of, can you put him in a position where you can hide him enough on defense at times, and then you weigh the value he brings on offense versus what you have to hide on defense. And if that's a net positive, I think someone will bring him in. And I think it will. Again, the shooting is so real that I do think you end up net positive there. But if there's a reason he isn't picked or isn't really given a great opportunity, I think it's that there's a question of, can he move and hang with NBA twos, on that floor?
Transition a little bit from talking about UNI's AJ Green, who just recently shared that he'd be staying in the NBA draft. One player in the state of Iowa that decided he would not go back or stay in the NBA draft, rather, that he did withdraw his name, was Chris Murray from Iowa. Derek, do you think that was a good choice?
I do, because I think he's got a legitimate chance to boost that stock. As we see kind of year to year, juniors and upperclassmen, maybe with the exception of 1 or 2 per year, like Duarte last year or Agbaji this year, people want youth and upside. So I do think that coming back puts a limit on how high he can get drafted next year. But again, his style of play, 6'8", 215, pretty versatile, scores well. I think he was as I pull it up, 54% from 2, 38 from 3. Like, he can score inside and out, and he's a highly intelligent, active defender, NBA length. I think there's a place for him in that early to mid second, probably next year, at least looking ahead of time. So I do think it was the right call to come back because he'll get some heavy usage.
Was he a second round guy to you?
We had not put him in a mock yet, even in the second round this year. So yeah, he was kind of on that fringe, in that fringe bucket for us, that, 60 to 75, that's 60 to 80, however you want to kind of break it up there.
And when you look at Chris, obviously he's twins with Keegan. Also, I'm assuming no relation to you, but Keegan, he's expected to be a top 10 pick in this year's NBA draft. Do you think there's a possibility that type of production we saw from Keegan this year could translate to Chris? Because I know, generally speaking, we kind of look at twins and say, well, they're basically the same. I mean, do you think that we'll see that, or there at least a possibility of that from Chris at Iowa this year?
I think it's a possibility. It would surprise me if we saw that kind of offensive production. That being said, in the volume that he had this year, per synergy, he was, 92nd percentile on the offensive glass and put back scoring in the paint, 92nd percentile as a post-up guy, average more than 1 point per possession as a spot-up shooter. So again, if you let him do that more and more, he shoots 38% from 3 on high volume. Yeah, I think you're at least in the teens. So with Keegan kind of out of the way, I do think he'll excel. Am I confident enough to say that we're going to see, those Keegan-like numbers where you have a kid going 23.5, 8.5, and 1.5? That just feels like a reach, but it would be for anybody. So that's not even anything against like Chris. But I do expect the jump up from he went almost 10 points a game. Wouldn't shock me to see that 14, 15, 16 range at all.
At the very least, I work with 2 Hawkeye fans, and they're very happy that Chris is coming back. Otherwise, it would have been a rebuilding year for Iowa, that's for sure. Again, we're talking with Derek Murray from basketballnews.com. He is an NBA draft scout and advisor. And when we look at Keegan, of course, like I mentioned, he's probably going to be a top 10 pick. We've talked a lot about him here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL and KOEL.com. So I've heard a variety of things. I mean, more recently, we talked with David Cobb from CBS Sports. He sees Keegan as possibly being a top 3 guy. I've also heard from, I think it's the Field of 68 podcast. I don't know if you've seen this clip, but it was just, they said they didn't necessarily like his frame, and they also don't think he's an athlete, and he's a 6'8" wing. I see exactly. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, that reaction exactly, Derek. What do you think of Murray and Keegan, and where do you think he'll go?
I mean, he's not going to be a top 3 pick, and that's not a knock on him at all. It's that I think there's a 4-player draft at the top with superstar potential who I just feel like will either be picked ahead of him or people will trade up to take those guys ahead of where Murray will go. So you have obviously Jabari, Chet, Banchero, and Ivy. Like, it's not a big 3 in this draft. I'm very adamant that it's a big 4. There are NBA teams who have Ivy at 1 or 2, and like that's just how it is. So I think it's a big 4. And then as soon as you get out of those 4, I do think Keegan is next. So if he were to go 4th, wouldn't shock me at all. Top 3 is where I kind of put the line of like I just simply do not see that happening. But on our mock right now, we actually have Murray at number 5 to Detroit. So anywhere in that 4 to 7, I mean 4 to 8, it would shock me honestly if he fell that far. You know, New Orleans to 8 or 8 to New Orleans feels like a perfect fit if he were to get all the way there. If I had to guess, it's probably the absolute floor for him. So yeah, I know. Would you be a fan? So yeah, I think kind of Detroit 5, Indiana 6. It's probably going to be one of those if I had to bet on it.
And like I've referenced here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk, I did used to cover the Pelicans. That's how Derek and I got connected, and lucky I did. This is my guy right here. But I will have to ask you a little bit about that. But before we do that, as we wind down here with Derek Murray from basketballnews.com, some more general stuff. Who's your top player out of this class, and who do you expect the Magic to take at 1?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Jabari. I would probably take Jabari Smith at number 1. 6'10", 220, arguably one of the best shooters, if not the best in the class. You've got a 40% guy at 6'10", an unblockable shot, moves like a wing, potential to be an incredibly high-level defender on and off the ball. It's like he can lock up probably 2 through 4 at this point, can also defend the switch onto 1 and 5. Like, it's just really, really versatile. He's got a great frame. He's an alpha as well. You know, I've talked to guys who played against him this year, and I said, what was it like playing against Jabari? And they said for 40 minutes, his only goal was to make sure that we knew he was better than us. You know what? That's what I want in a guy I take at the top. That's why Jabari's up there. That's one of the reasons that people love Ivy so much. And again, that's not that – I mean, Chet and Paolo are both incredibly tough and competitive in their own right. So that's why I can see any of those 4 going 1. But personally, I would probably take Jabari Smith if the draft were tomorrow.
So final question, because I used to cover the Pels, who do you think they grab at 8, and who do you think they should grab?
As of the update we put out last night, we have Shaedon Sharpe at 8 going to the Pelicans. So Dyson Daniels was there for a while. Now there's talk of him not getting past, 6 or 7. I think that's the floor for Keegan, and I think Mathurin fits as well. So in my mind, the Pelicans walk away with one of Keegan, Dyson, Mathurin, or Sharpe. I just feel like it's one of those 4. 8 is a nice place. I think 9 is where you have a really tough decision in this year's draft because I think there's a break in kind of the tiers for me. So 8 is kind of hey, one of them is going to fall to us. We're going to get an amazing player, and it's kind of a good place to be.
At the expense of the Lakers, which is always good. He is Derek Murray from basketballnews.com. He's an analyst, NBA draft scout, and advisor at DMurrayHoops on Twitter. Go give him a follow. Derek, we always appreciate having you on, man.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. I always enjoy it.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Corn Stalks and Sports Talk. Thanks so much for tuning in right here on AM 950 and KOEL.com. If you missed any part of today's show, you can always listen to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or anywhere else you do listen to your podcasts. Of course, anytime we have a guest on, those will be uploaded as videos on YouTube as well. You can find my YouTube account. It's just Elliot Clough there on that site. You can also follow me on Twitter. It's Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter, ELIOTCLOUGH. Once again, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. This was another week's episode of Cornstalks and Sports Talk.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.